Hello, everybody. So, for today's video, we're going to be talking about the different forms of governments and the forms of governments that I'll be discussing here today. I won't be mentioning any form or type of example for any of the forms of government that I'm going to be mentioning, okay? Because this is just going to be a short and brief introduction of forms of government. And there are a lot of these, so I'm not going to get I'm not going to get more in depth than I necessarily have to, but I just wanted to explain what these forms of governments basically entail. Okay, so let's start off with the first one, which is the anarchy or the anarchy form of government. Okay, so what's contradictory about this is not actually a form of government, because an anarchy is just having no an anarchy is basically just a society that doesn't have a hierarchy or like a power that basically structures how the people of the society should work and should comply or should behave. Okay, there are no laws whatsoever, and that is an anarchy. Okay, there is no centralized or local source of power or authority. No one has any authority over anything in a society. That is what an anarchy is. Okay, so the cartoon illustrations that I chose for this presentation are probably going to be a little bit satirical, but you can just not mind that because really they're just for visual purposes. Okay, so you can see here the cartoon says, "I tried to set up a small anarchist collective, but people just wouldn't obey the rules." So that's kind of what that's kind of a summary of what an anarchy society is. Okay, there are no rules. Centralized. There is no centralized power that governs an entire society. Okay. So let's go on to the next form of government, which is the aristocracy. Okay. So the aristocracy is basically just a form of government wherein the people who govern the country or nation or state or society that is of interest are basically people who are considered the best citizens. Okay, the best of the best citizens. These people could be oligarchs. Okay, could be people from corporates, from massive corporations that technically have a lot of power. Okay, so these people need to have a lot of power, whether it be financially or militarily. Okay, and as you can see here in the cartoon picture, you can see just below the picture it says here, the Duke and Duchess of AT&T, the Count and Countess of Citicorp. So you basically just get the idea. Okay, the people who rule in an aristocracy are people who are powerful in some way or another, but they are just citizens. Okay, they are just citizens. Okay, so the next would be the authoritarian regimes. You may have already heard this from your history class or humanities classes. Okay, authoritarian regimes, authoritarianism. When you hear authoritarian, okay, the first thing that comes to mind is authority. Okay, that is completely the essence of what an authoritarian regime is, or what an authoritarian state is. Okay, the people who run the authoritarian regime are basically elected people. Okay, they are still elected people, but the only nuance is, okay, and I'm just going to pick one of the nuances. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to correct that. This is not the only nuance. Okay, the most notable nuance is the people who are in authoritarian positions. They basically suppress the political oppositions, which means that there is no political pluralism. Okay, and political pluralism basically just means that that there is diversity in a certain government. Okay, that there is diversity in the political parties that are included in the elections, and in authoritarian regimes, political pluralism is basically okay is basically zero because of the person who is ruling this authoritarian regime. So let's go to the next example, the next form of government, which is bureaucracy. Okay, so the essence of bureaucracy is very simple. It's basically just people. Okay, it's basically just people who aren't elected. Okay, these are non-elected officials, but they are still in some way or another ruling the government. Okay, so these are people who are inside desk jobs, who are working for the government. Okay, who are working directly for the government in order to pass laws whatsoever. Okay, that is exactly what a bureaucracy is. Okay, so the next is capitalism. You may have already heard this. This is a very common topic. Okay, especially among debates. Capitalism is just a form of government. Okay, okay, we're in people have the freedom in order to get their own private properties. Okay, in order to own their individual private properties, as well as grow their wealth. Okay, that's basically the essence of capitalism, from my own understanding. So the next would be a confederation. A confederation is basically just the united. Okay, the people. Okay, so let's say that there are two countries. Okay, these two countries. Okay, could be let's say the United States and the United Kingdom. Okay, if they were to form a confederation, they would need to have a purpose for it. They would need to have an agenda, a shared agenda, in order for them to form this confederation. So a confederation is basically, okay, and this is oversimplifying it, is basically just a pact between two sovereign nations, two sovereign states. Okay, and what I mean by sovereign is that they are both completely individual. They are both completely different nations that are forming a pact for a shared agenda. Okay, so the next type of government, the next form of government is a confessional state. What is a confessional state? Okay, so it's very simple. A confessional state is basically, okay, just a state or a nation or society. Okay, it's basically just a nation wherein the government actively, okay, it actively promotes their own religion. It could be regional or it could be the whole entire nation. Okay, they basically just actively promote their religion. But the only distinct difference is that you need to realize about confessional states is that they are not the same as theocracy. Okay, theocracies are basically, okay, every the officials in a theocratic state are basically religious people. Okay, while as in confessional states, they don't need to be really religious. Okay, the people who are officials in this, they don't need to be religious, but they actively promote the church. Okay, they actively promote whatever religion they have. So the next would be colonialism. Colonialism, sorry. Colonialism is basically an imperialist type of government. Okay, and what I mean by imperialist type of government is basically the agenda, okay, the main essence of colonialism is to gain territory. Okay, they gain territory in order to gain power or money or resources. Okay, that's exactly what colonialism is. Okay, they basically just try to extend their territory or their power to other countries, to other nations, in order for them to benefit for their own gain, for their own resources. Okay, and that's basically what colonialism is. So the next would be communism. So please don't mind the picture of Dr. Doofenshmirtz here with a Soviet Union uniform. So a communism, okay, true communism is basically just a form of government with a goal that that seeks to produce a nation or a state, okay, that is fundamentally equal, okay, where people don't have social classes, there's no wealth inequality, okay, all people of a certain nation share the same resources, okay, share the same resources, whether it be financially or properties, okay, which is basically the government sort of being the equalizer for all of these things, for all the resources that a certain nation has, okay? And this is basically just like the antithesis of capitalism, wherein communism is just like the opposite, okay? They control just how much just how much you make, or they control the private properties that you own, the private companies that you own, okay? So that is communism. Now we have corporatocracy, okay? So corporatocracies are basically, okay, this is basically the form of government wherein the government, the people who make the big decisions are basically corporations, okay? And that's self-explanatory from the title itself, okay? Corporations. And that's the essence of corporatocracy. As you can see here in the cartoon right here, it says here, government of big tech, big oil, and big pharma. So this is a satirical cartoon, basically just implying that technology and oil companies, pharmaceutical companies own a certain state or a certain nation, okay? So he says here, what happened to government of the people, by the people, or for people, okay? So the next is democracy. As you may have already heard this, okay? And I say the word may very lightly because democracy is the most common form of a government, okay? So basically the democracy, it advocates for all the people, okay? For all the people choosing who their leader is, okay? By means of voting and etc. And that's basically the essence of democracy. So now we have oh my god. I messed up, okay? Let me just restart that, okay? We got ecclesiocracy, okay? Ecclesiocracy is basically, okay, the government of a church, okay? It's basically just the government of a church. Now we have the last form of government, which is electocracy, okay? And I use the same cartoon as I did in the democracy part, because electocracy is basically just the premature form of democracy. And what I mean by premature form is basically electocracy is just fundamentally democracy. Okay? The people of a certain nation can vote for who the leader is, but those people who voted, okay, they do not have any power towards the decisions of the people who they voted for to run the government, okay? And that's basically it for the different types of government. This is just going to be part one of the different types of government that I'm going to be discussing. There's inevitably going to be a part two, but I don't know when that is. So, thank you for watching. If you learned anything, please subscribe. If you like the video, please like and comment. It really helps a lot. And if you don't like the video, if you didn't like the video, you can feel free to share your own feedback below. I will definitely read that, okay? I will definitely read that, take that into consideration, okay? So thank you guys for watching.